Today is Saturday, April 15th, 2006, and we're interviewing Miss Alberta Goodwin at her home in Bolivar, Missouri. Miss Goodwin is 80 years old, having been born on October 11th, 1925. My name is Brett Lipscomb from Missouri State University, and I'll be the interviewer. Also attending the interview is James Walker and Tyler Moore. Miss Alberta, could you state for the recording what war and the capacity in which you served, please?
Well, in the very beginning, I must clarify that I was a civil service registered nurse at Misawa, Japan Air Force Base with my husband. Therefore, this 1950 is when I went to Misawa. Got on the train with two babies, one about 8 months old, the other about 2 years old, at 2 a.m. in San Antonio, Texas. My husband's grandmother and grandfather were there, and my mother and father, and none of us knew where Misawa, Japan was.
Yeah.
In the dark of night, I got on this train and had a room, which was great, with the children, and went to Los Angeles and changed trains. Went on north to San Francisco and got on this ship, the USS Barrett, and went away.
Went away.
Yes, don't you know your mother and father and the grandparents saying goodbye to you in the middle of the night with the two babies, not knowing where we were going.
Mm-hmm.
But we were going to my husband, and that's what counted.
That's right. Well, how did you become a nurse during the war? What made you want to do that versus other options for women in the...
Oh, I just, in high school, I read all kinds of books. And the books that impressed me so much were the books that Pearl S. Buck wrote. And from there, I went to a nurse's training in San Antonio. And here's my pictures of everything, of me being in first year student and graduating student and a cadet nurse. Let's see if I've got some pictures that are bigger. My granddaughter, Barbara, put this book together for me. Oh, here is 1943. Graduation from high school. And 2 weeks later, I went into nurses training right from high school, and I was 16 years old. But I knew exactly what I wanted to do, and there was no problem. And of course, during the war, they wanted nurses to hurry up and graduate, and so instead of 36 months at Incarnate Word College in San Antonio, we took 30 months and got out early. And so that we could go and do something in the war, which I got married and went to the Air Force with my husband. But do you want to look at these pictures?
Sure.
Okay. Going to Misawa, here's the housing for the American. Here's more pictures. That's from the roadside or street. They were brand new, and we were just happy to be together. And one day, a Jeep pulled up in front of that house, and had civilian personnel in it and a military person from the hiring office. And I don't know how, but they knew they got word that I was a nurse. And so they came and talked to me and asked me if I'd go to work. And it was like a big MASH hospital. It was in a permanent building on this Air Force base, but it was a 20-bed hospital with enlisted men as corpsmen, and I think there were about 3 doctors, and we had 3 RNs, 1 for each shift. And I've got my, I found a copy of my job description that they brought to me, the civilian personnel, and you can have that.
Thank you.
But here, that was in 1950, and here is the original. Just look how it has deteriorated and colored. And here's one of my licenses from the state of Texas. I was registered in the state of Texas and in California and in Missouri. So, but they interviewed me, and then they asked me to provide what's that called, of your grades from your graduating grade?
Transcript.
Transcript, yeah. So I sent back to the college and got a transcript, and they overlooked that and wanted me to come right to work.
Oh, that's good. Whenever you got on your ship, you said you didn't know where you were going, but where did you end up?
Tokyo.
Tokyo.
Yeah, and we went through a typhoon.
Goodness.
Yeah, the ship would list this way, and then it would and when it would go one way, the tail rudder or the fan would shake the ship.
Goodness.
Oh, highly exciting. And there were a couple of thousand of men down below in the bottom under the water line. And this was the very last ship to go to Japan because of the war in Vietnam had started. And we didn't get any household goods. Our house was furnished by the housing office. And we had no curtains. So one day they brought a bolt of silk, white silk, and said I could have curtains made out of that if I wanted to. So I made all Priscilla curtains. You know, those are the straight ones with big ruffles, and in the dining room and living room. And I enjoyed that so much. They were so pretty. But it was very exciting. We could not even eat during that typhoon. Some military personnel would bring sandwiches and something to drink to us in our staterooms. I had a real nice stateroom. It had a big, beautiful leather couch and a desk, and had bunk beds. But with the 2 children, they had put a little fence around the bottom bunk for the 2 children to sleep in. And when you was on that couch at night and the ship was going like that, you didn't have anybody, didn't need to rock you to sleep. It did it for you.
Did it for you.
Yeah.
What was it like whenever you arrived in Tokyo? Can you kind of describe how you felt?
Balloons and tapers being thrown from the dock. The men were so happy to see all their wives coming, yeah, and the children. Yeah, and a band, the Air Force band was there playing, and it was big hoopla. Yeah. And from there we went to Osaka and spent about 4 months until this housing was finished for us. But not all of the families went to Osaka. Some of them went to southern Japan. Some went to other bases that we had established in Japan. But my husband was stationed at Misawa, and that is the most northern tip on the island of Honshu. So we really had snow, much snow, very mountainous regions, and snow up to the eaves of the house when the wind would blow it and stack it up. And we had steam heat provided by the plant that was established on the airbase, and it was very efficient. And the windows, you could unlock them and push them out to get ventilation. Well, when they were pushed out, the two little boys would take and push their toys out. And they'd be gone until spring. You know? And we had one maid. Our first maid was given to us by the country of Japan as repatriation payment. And she was the best maid and entertained the children so much. And she had a basketball. And you know how people bounce a basketball between their legs? Oh, she was so good at that. And she entertained the children. We had such a good time with her. And behind this house was a slit trench. You know what that is? A slit trench is about 3 feet wide, and it's would be about, well, they dug them the length that it would require for your size family. So ours was about 5, 6 feet long, and it was about 4 feet deep. That was for safety purposes in case of bombings, because Russia had planes flying over every day, reconnaissance planes, taking pictures of what we were doing and the movement of the men and equipment and things. And then can you see a pole on the right-hand end of the house there on the picture? That's a clothesline pole. Well, at that clothesline pole was about another big hole about the size of this table dug, and there was a machine gun implanted there, a 2-man machine gun implanted there for the safety of the base and the people on it. Highly exciting. And the maid was so good. Every morning she would get up and go and shovel and sweep the sidewalk to the street. And she'd stand the shovel and the broom up at the end of the sidewalk. And then when we would come home for lunch, then we'd sweep in. And the went on every day during the winter. Heavy snows. But you have, what other questions? I mean, I can go on and on.
Well, what was the life like there? You said there were 3 RNs, 1 for each shift. What did you do between shifts other than sleep? Catch up on?
Well, my husband and my 2 children took up time. And
that's true.
We had birthday parties, and we had the officers' club and pools and things like that. We entered the theater. Colin Kelly was the first pilot shot down during the Vietnam War. And so the theater on Misawa Air Force Base was named Kelly Theater. and it had a big, big portrait of him hanging in the lobby of the theater. And we'd have one movie that'd go for 5 days or so, and we didn't know, nobody knew what was going to come in because nothing was for sure over there as to what would happen and what you would get. Now, living that far north, we didn't have any fresh vegetables. So we learned, being in the medical profession, well, I knew that we couldn't eat anything that we bought off the Japanese open market. And so if you had apples or bananas or turnips, you could peel those. But you couldn't eat any strawberries unless you'd put them through a Lysol bath because of the type of fertilizer they used over there. So we learned to, we never ate cucumbers before, but we learned to like cucumbers, yeah, because we could peel those, and that was fresh vegetable for a salad.
Did you ever travel any while you were a nurse there on the base, or did you stay on the base most of the time?
We had a Jeep that, there we go, a Jeep that we traveled around the countryside in. And we thought we would take our maid the first time because we didn't speak Japanese. Well, we traveled for a day or so, and lo and behold, we got out of her prefectures. See, here in the United States we call them counties, but in Japan they're called prefectures. Got out of her neighborhood and her area, her county. She couldn't speak Japanese to the other people. So my husband and I ended up sign language and a little bit of Japanese that we knew. But talking about Japanese and the maid, she came to us one morning all excited. All excited. She had to have the afternoon off. Well, what are you going to do? Are you okay? Are somebody in your family or something? Well, she tried her best to tell us. What we got out of it, she wanted to go to the post. Well, we didn't know if she was going to go around on the base. So finally she got English, Japanese dictionary and came and started showing us and flipping pages. And it ended up, it was the first time in her life that she got to go vote. The people were getting to vote. And this was in 1950. And she was so excited. So we said, sure, we'll just drive you down there. No problem. So, I mean, that was a high point in her life. Yeah. And there was always things exciting happening. Never a dull moment.
That's good.
Here's a picture of snow on the housing area. I've got to tell you, oh, and here's pictures of and here is a carpenter in our housing area. He's on a bicycle and he's got a cloth bag on his back with his carpenter tools in.
Okay.
I must tell you about one of the corpsmen that I worked with. He was like a tech sergeant. And that day I told him, now you wander, move around, check the patients, watch the corpsman, and see what's going on. And And all day long he carried a green glass Coke bottle. And he had some Coke in it. And I didn't think anything about it, and everything was going along. And about 2 o'clock in the afternoon, glass started crashing. And in surgery, the trays holding all the instruments was thrown. I ran to the surgical unit, and everything was thrown all over, and there he was in there, and he come after me and grabbed me and took me by the chin and put me up on the wall. Oh my. And I started talking just as fast, and it hit me what he had been doing. He had taken straight alcohol from the x-ray department, putting it in his Coke, and all of a sudden he had just gone berserk. And I started talking. And I talked, and he let me down. And one of the other corpsmen had called the MPs right away when he saw me on the wall. And of course they came and just manhandled him and took him away. Oh, he was a big fella, and you know, on that, well, he was strong too. So, what do you do when you're off far away like that? Just things come up all the time. There's never a dull moment. Yeah. So we were there for a year and a half. And my husband was transferred to Nagoya Air Force Base. That was about 2,000 miles south. And so I went with him, and the military personnel office took a nurse from the Nagoya hospital up to the Misawa hospital, and I took her job and she took my job. And let's see, I've got a picture here someplace of the Nagoya. Oh, and here is Asumichi, Japan. It's a little village along the seaside that we would visit. And here is our housing in Nagoya. And that was called American Village, and it was almost downtown Nagoya. It was, and here is a big building downtown Nagoya that was the American Hospital. And that building was a telephone company. And it had marble floors, and the walls, 4 foot up the walls, were all marble. It was a beautiful, beautiful building. And we had United Nations troops, patients there from the front. You know, in that war, we had a lot of help. And we had men from the battlefront that would be brought in caked with mud and blood. They'd have to have a bath and cleaned up. And I was assigned to the supervisory of the orthopedic floor. And so they all would get a bath before they could be examined even. And then when they got settled in and they're cast on, they would get paid. And in those days, they were all paid in cash. And I had a 5-cell flashlight that I carried when I would be on night duty. And I'd make my rounds with this big, long flashlight. And sometimes they'd call me over to their bed. And they'd have a roll of money this big. And they'd say they were afraid to sleep with it. Would I lock it up for them? And then they would be there a few days, and they would just be feeling so good. And they had money. And we were on the 3rd floor. And they would tie sheets together and go out in the evening, escape, you know, when nobody was looking, and go down those sheets. And I tell you, it wouldn't be, maybe, we'd know they were gone, but about 4 or 5 hours later, the MPs would bring them in, and they would have gone berserk on rice whiskey. We'd have to put them in a padded cell because they were just gone berserk. And when they got to feeling good, they did so many things. I had a long room that had 30 patients, 15 on each side of the wall. And you go in one end, and then you go down the line of beds and everything, and you go out the other door on the other end and into the hallway. And one day, I took a tray of medicines in one door, and all of a sudden, as I walked in, I saw somebody running out the other door. And all the GIs were just snickering and trying to be quiet and trying to be good. And I stepped back out in the hallway, and there was this little Turkish soldier, all naked. They had taken all of his clothes away from him, and and I had walked in about that time, and he was scared to death. It was so funny. Yeah, something like that's going on all the time. So you just have to stay prepared. And you'd never wake one of those men up at 10 o'clock at night if he's asleep, or if at midnight or 2 a.m. I mean, you'd never go lay your hand on his shoulder and say, it's time for your medicine, because he'd bounce up out of there and take you down in just a blink of an eye. They were on guard all the time. Sure. Yeah. And taking shrapnel out of them was an afternoon pastime, I guess, because they all had shrapnel in them and had to get it out before it caused infections. But it was lots of activity.
Yeah. Is there any specific instances you can remember about being a nurse, caring for any GIs, or?
Well, one of them I had broken one GI, real big guy, you know, this manly guy, and little bitty red pimples all over, arms and chest, face and back, and he had turned up a penicillin reaction, and he was allergic to it. And so I played gin rummy with, I didn't know how to play gin rummy, but he would say, what am I supposed to do the next move, and give him some medicine to help alleviate the pain of all this. And for 20, 30 minutes, you know, and medicine would take over, then I'd go on about my other duties. But he was really a sad situation. And in those days, penicillin and sulfa was still being used. But it did good if you didn't turn up allergic to it. Yeah. Oh, I don't know. We had lots of people in the military from all different countries, and it was all an everyday trial, trying to understand what their needs were, because they didn't speak as much English as we needed, and of course we didn't speak any Turkish or anything like that. So it was big, and we all got along real well. Everybody worked together. The nurses and the doctors, and I had 3 Japanese nurses that was working on the unit with me, and I had about 6 corpsmen that worked also. So we were well staffed, I think.
How long did you stay working in the hospital before you either came back?
Well, I was a year and a half at Misawa and a year and a half at Nagoya. See, our tour was 3 years. And then we rotated back to the United States. And we were here 1 year, and then we were sent to Clark Air Force Base in the Philippine Islands. So that was another. And there at Clark Air Force Base, we had the polio epidemic came about. And we had missionaries and military personnel on many, Philippine Islands is made up of islands, and all just not much other than a mass of islands. And so we had missionaries and military and civilian people brought in from outlying areas that had developed polio. And that was the day of the iron lung. Do any of you know anything about the iron lungs? Well, they were a metal circular tube with windows in it, because it was like, had hinges on it. And their breathing capacity had diminished. And this iron lung had a function of breathing for that polio patient. And there was negative and positive pressure, and that's how they would breathe. Their head would be outside on a shelf-like area with, pillows and everything, and but the rest of their body would be inside this iron lung, and it was electrically run. But because polio was very contagious, I had a corpsman that worked with me. There was always 2 people with the polio patient, because he couldn't talk, and you had to watch his facial expressions. And if he could talk, well, it would be minimal, and so you had to have 2 people with every polio patient, and you had to gown up and a cap and a mask, and you had 3 different solutions sitting outside the area of the patient area, and you'd go through one solution with your hands and then go into the next solution and then the next. Then you could go in, and the same thing when you came out. You'd disrobe and dismask and go through all these solutions. And if we had electrical outage, we had generators that was at beside each iron lung. And one day a patient was flown in from one of these outlying islands and was so far gone that I had to, this corpsman and I had to do a tracheostomy on him and put a breathing tube in. And do you know what that is? Mm-hmm. You know what tracheostomy? Yeah. Put a breathing tube in here, and then he could, with the negative and positive pressure, he could get air to his lungs and continue breathing. That was highly exciting. I mean, we had called for doctors to come, but they didn't get there. I don't know, they were someplace else. So we had to go ahead and do it, and it was an emergency thing. It had to be done. And as soon as they were able to breathe on their own, well, then they'd be flown out to the United States. Oh, and we had at Clark in the Philippine Islands, we had a registered nurses club. Had about 28 to 30 nurses in the club. And we decided that we would do some public health. And so we went to a village of Negrito pygmies. And I'm sure you know what the pygmies are in Africa. Well, these were pygmies in southern Luzon, the Philippine Islands. And the men were maybe 5 feet tall. And of course the women were shorter. And we helped them by going out and helping them with food and cooking, and because they were cooking on rocks. And they had only gourds that they would grow on the thatch of their house. And they'd cut those open, and that would be a vessel for them. And they ate with their hands, and that was a big experience and new experience for everybody. And the men wore, that was the beginning of the thong. No lie. They had wore a thong and no shoes, no shirt, because here you are in the tropics, and it never got any lower temperature than like 58 degrees and hotter. And they had a bolo tied onto this thong, and a bolo is a knife that's about 4 foot long, and that's what they carried with them. And they wanted bananas or coconuts, they would climb the tree and they'd take that bolo and cut down a whole stalk of bananas. And coconut, wham, just cut that coconut right in two with that bolo. And another instrument they carried on their thong was dart gun. And it was a long bamboo pole, and they made their own little darts on thin bamboo strips. And on the end of the strips, they would dip them in their concoction of poison. And if they saw a bird up in the tree, they could blow that dart up there and kill that bird, and the poison. They would burn and go right on until it was noon time they would eat, and they would stop and build a fire and cook it. So we may have taught them a lot, something, but they showed us a lot of survival techniques. It was a good experience for us all and made us appreciate. I'm telling you, everyone should be sent overseas to live. And when they came back, they would really appreciate America. We have so much, and those people had so little. But they had families, and they had togetherness, and therefore they didn't know any different, and they were happy. But it was a big, and we were there for 3 years on that base, at Clark Air Force Base at the Philippine Islands. And when we rotated back to the United States, that volcano, can't remember the name of it. Which?
Mount St. Helens.
Mount Sinai?
St. Helens?
No, that's in Washington State. But this was a volcano near the base in the Philippines. And it erupted, and the lava flowed all over the base. And that was the end of Clark Air Force Base.
Goodness.
But while we were there, it was about 40 miles to Manila. And if you went off the base, you had a driver, and then you had a man riding shotgun with a rifle. And if you were an officer, you had a revolver strapped on. But families, children and wives did not go off the base at all unless they went on a military bus and it transported them down to Manila. Or Sangley Bay was the naval base, and we'd go down there and visit and things of that nature. But other than that, we stayed right on the base unless we were escorted off, such as we had to be, because they had huck bellhops marauding in the mountain area, and at night they would come down out of the mountains and grab pigs and dogs, children, women, and take them back up into the mountains. And this was the early years of terrorists, and they're still carrying on today. So that's one reason we didn't go off much. But when we got a chance with surveillance guides and assistants, like in the summertime, we'd go up to a lovely area in the mountains, high in the mountains, like 6,000 or more feet up. And you've heard of buses in the Philippines careening over a mountain and killing all the people. It'd be about 500 feet down and make the news all over the world. Well, these were the roads that we were having to drive on to get up to this lovely place in the mountains. It was called Baguio. And it was so nice and so cool up there that the Filipino government in Manila would transport their people and their paperwork and everything up to Baguio for the summer because of the heat, because nobody had air conditioning. Nobody had television. But my husband was in communications, so one day all these boxes arrived from the United States. All sizes of boxes, from little match boxes to big boxes you could put a car in. And it was a television station. So he and his men put this television station together from nuts and bolts and put it up on what they call Signal Hill. And we had one TV channel. And it started about 4 o'clock in the afternoon with music and a TV signal. That's all. until 6 o'clock. And then we had programs on that were canned and shipped to us from the States. And so you didn't argue about what channel you were going to watch or what program. It was just one channel. But we were happy to have it. And this is where we learned to play bridge, because we had to make our own entertainment. And so this was like, 1956, 57, and 58 that we were there. And we learned to play bridge and had a great time. And to this day, I still play bridge here in Bolivar, like Tuesday afternoon, Thursday afternoon, and Friday night. I still play bridge, and that is a mathematical game. And if you can keep your cards straight, your bids straight, and your suit straight, that's a mathematical challenge. So that's why I keep playing it.
A couple more questions, I guess. You said after 3 years y'all rotated back to the United States. What did you do when you got back there?
We went to Whiteman Air Force Base, where the stealth bombers are, except, you know, they were not there at that time because they hadn't been invented it. This was 1958 when we rotated back to the United States. And I was a nurse there at Whiteman Air Force Base Hospital for about a year and a half, and I was a public health nurse in Johnson County, Missouri, and I had a radio program telling the people what I was doing, where I was going to be, how they could prevent mumps, like they got now, an epidemic of mumps, and how to keep your water clean, and testing for diabetes, and I had a newspaper article every week, and also telling the people where I was going to be testing years, where I'd be checking children's eyes in the school, or where I'd be testing for scoliosis, and things like that. My office was in the courthouse, and every morning I would leave in my car and drive Johnson County, and I'd get back to my office at 4 o'clock, and I'd dictate to my secretary what I had done with what patients. And so the next day she'd type it all up and put it in each patient's file, and we had lots and lots of activities going for the county.
So you just continued to be a nurse even after you left the military, or did you retire from the military?
Oh, no, I continued on, yeah. Oh, yeah. I worked in not only Whiteman Air Force Base Hospital, but the hospital at the city of Warrensburg. And then we moved to Stockton in 1969, and I was school nurse there. And one day they came up and said they didn't have a paramedic to ride on the ambulance. Would I ride on the ambulance once in a while till they got some paramedics graduated? I said, sure. So we did that for a while, and it rocked on for 3 years. Well, many times I had to drive the ambulance to Springfield to the hospital, and the siren blowing. Oh, I get so upset. And one time I was coming down Sunshine, then Sunshine turned there at the St. John's Hospital. Nobody would get out of the way. They just sat. Everybody was just frozen, and the sirens were going, and I was driving. I backed up, went around that cement island, and went on into St. John's Emergency on Cherokee Street into their emergency room. entrance. Oh, I'll never forget that. That was so exasperating. So hard to handle that big old ambulance too in the traffic.
I'm sure.
Yeah.
Well, we've covered quite a bit. Is there anything else you'd like to add that we haven't covered in the interview about your service experience, how it might have affected your life, or thinking about war, military, or just anything you'd like to add?
I had a real good life. It was a hard work keeping up and doing everything that was required, but everybody worked hard in those days and got very little pay for it. If you'll see on that statement, here I've got one. This, I went to work in 1950 at Misawa at the price, 8 hours a day, supervisory, doing everything, $3,100 a year. And that was good money. Yes, that was good money. And when I graduated from Santa Rosa Hospital and Incarnate Word College, we were top-notch nurses and were offered the best jobs in San Antonio because we were graduating from this good hospital. And we were paid $1 an hour. And you know, you ask people back in the, I graduated in 1946, and you ask in the 40s and 50s, what'd you make? And I'd say $1 an hour, and they'd say, wow, that was good money those days, really good money. So, as time passes, things change. Yeah.
Well, I think that does conclude this interview. I'm not seeing anybody else has any more questions. And we would like to thank Miss Alberta, Miss Goodwin, for letting us come into her home and recollect on the past.
Oh, well, I'm happy to. I enjoyed it.